Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the show. You guys know I only bring about the best of the best guests to the show, the top 1% of the guests to the show. And today we are joined with Russell Anders, an author whose passion for storytelling began in early childhood and evolved into a lifelong study of the craft. After years of writing, rewriting, and refining his approach, he shifted from overstudying to consistent creation, eventually producing a manuscript that earned a publishing offer. Russell, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Russell. Before we get started on the show, can you please introduce yourself to my listeners?
Certainly. My name is Russell Anders. I am a first time author. Uh, my first book was put out last July, so we're coming up on just about a year. But that is not the first book that I've written. So I have been writing for a very long time, and it's taken me a while to transition from writer to author. But it's been a very I've had a lot of opportunities to learn along that way.
Thank you very much, Russell. Russell, let's get started on the show. What was your path to getting published, and what was the turning point that changed everything for you as a writer?
I think that there were several. So my path really began when I was very, very young. My mother would read me bedtime stories, and I, as a kid, would often start to interrupt her and say, "Well, then what happened? Well, then what happened?" And her answer, instead of telling me what happened, was a question of her own. She would say, "Well, I don't know. Why don't you tell me?" And so I started spinning tales as I was going to bed. So that put very early in me, it put the love of storytelling. I was an avid reader, even as a very young child. So storytelling became synonymous with the written word for me. And for a very long time, I just loved writing stories. I didn't do it for any particular reason. I didn't send my stuff off for publication, which is good. It probably wouldn't have gotten anywhere. But I just got a lot of work in writing for the joy of it. Somewhere along the way, I began to understand that in order to write commercial fiction, something that I could share with somebody else on something beyond a very personal, hey, can you read this as a favor, but actually putting something out there that people would want to engage with, required more than just love of story. It required actual study. So I began to read a lot about it, to take courses, and I began to understand that there was more to it than just understanding things like the three-act structure or the story cycle or things like that. It was learning how to write in such a way that the story and the entire experience of its presentation was really something of a partnership between me and my reader. And so I needed to trust my reader a little bit. I had to get a better idea of who this person was and then leave certain things in their hands. That was a really big lesson for me, that I didn't need to describe absolutely everything. I just needed to describe the things that I really needed them to be on the same page with me about in order to understand the story and the scene. Beyond that, give it to them. Let them take part in the creative process. That's one of the things that really sets reading and novel writing apart from film and TV. And that transformed the way that I thought about storytelling in a huge way.
Thank you very much, Russell. Russell, where do your story ideas usually come from? Are they sparked by observation, imagination, or experience?
I think it's a combination of all of those things. I the method that I use isn't really one that I consciously designed, but I did not too long ago see it articulated really well by a writer. I believe he's Scottish, named Warren Ellis. And what Ellis describes doing for himself is something that I was doing without awareness. So now it's just something I engage with more deliberately. And the process is as simple as this. He says that he, in between writing projects, binges on media, all kinds of things, movies, TV shows, comic books, novels, news, and he dumps all of this into his subconscious, which he describes as something like a still. And he just lets that all swirl together in the semi-aqueous solution of random ideas and factoids. And he says eventually something will ferment. Some odd mixture of these things will come together and present itself to him. Now, it's not a story, but it's a seed, it's a starting point. And I have found this to be absolutely phenomenal for my own creative process. I don't go out and look for ideas so much as I just try to throw my awareness wide of what's going on in the world and what's going on in imaginary worlds, and apply just a little bit of deliberate creative heat to it. I usually will watch movies and even maybe a little bit less when I read, because reading does take a little bit more intellectual engagement directly. But because movies are a more passive experience, I will oftentimes be thinking as I'm watching it how I might change the story, how I might take some element of it. It's always just simmering in the background. So oftentimes these seeds they will appear to come out of nowhere, but now I know where they are actually coming from. And it's once I have that seed, then I will start to deliberately pull it apart and work through implications. And these could be anything. It could be an idea for a setting. It could be an idea for a plot element. It could be a character. And a lot of times I'll have some random collection of these that I need to bring together. One, a character idea over here, a setting idea over here, and then beyond developing them individually, seeing how they begin to interact, that's where the story really begins to germinate. But the initial process is just to be mindfully taking things in and keeping all of that in the background. And sometimes it just bubbles up when I'm not thinking about it, and I just make a note and I have my beginning material.
Thank you very much, Russell. Here's my next question for you. Can you walk us through your writing process from initial idea to finished draft?
Certainly. I was for a long time a big proponent of pantsing, right? Just writing by your seat, writing by the seat of your pants. And the big reason for this was nothing more involved than I had read interviews by some of my favorite authors, including, for example, Stephen King, who speaks rather stridently for pantsing and against pre-planning and outlining. He says that if he knows where a story is going to go before he writes it, then the entire experience becomes boring to him. And he worries that the writing itself will subsequently be boring and flat. And so I figured, well, the man obviously knows what he's talking about, so I should do what he does. And I found that whole process works atrociously for me. When I tried this, it took me 10 years to write my first book, which has never been published, because it was also something like 600,000 words, because I was wandering all over the place. I had no idea what I was going to do with it. And so the story wanders all over the place, and it is lacking a major through line also. It turns out not all things work for all people. So I am actually very much on the structured side. So I start with these seeds, like I was talking about before, and then I will try to condense the entire thing down into just a single line. Just, how would I pitch this book in 1 or 2 sentences? From there, I'll try to break it out into 3 acts. I will also come up with a cast of characters as I'm developing the plot. I want to have a fully realized cast of people who are more than plot elements. So While I'm thinking about the major storyline, I'm also thinking about who these people are and what their issues might be. Then I will work to integrate the two, usually working in a spreadsheet. And eventually, what I will wind up with is a fairly comprehensive outline that details scene by scene what's going to happen in the book. And I diagram each of those scenes because without this, I will oftentimes write filler without meaning to. So every scene has to have a purpose. Every scene has to have a conflict that drives things forward, or some introspective moment or something like that. It has to do more than just give information. And once I have that, then I will actually begin the writing process. And the thing about it is, I have found that it very much does not flatten my enthusiasm or the prose to know where it's going, because this outline is a map. It's not a straitjacket. More often than not, what happens is this keeps me going in the right general direction, but it doesn't dictate what's actually going to happen. And I've used this process twice now. I'm in the final stages of the rough draft of my next book. And in both cases, what's happened is this has provided me some guidance so that I don't just wander around aimlessly trying to figure out where the book is going. I know where it's going, but the way that I get there deviates from this outline. At some point, once I'm writing the prose and the characters really start showing up with their own voices and driving the action, they will go in a direction that's not exactly the one that I plotted out. But the way I think of it these days is, if GPS had originally slotted me to take a cross-country trip using all interstates, then what winds up actually happening is that I'm still taking that cross-country trip, but I might be taking some back roads here and there that I didn't originally plan on, but it's still going to land me more or less where I wanted to, and the path that I'm taking is still moving in that same direction. It's just a little different from what I thought I was going to do, and it turns out the scenery along the way is beautiful.
Thank you very much, Mr. What is the best piece of advice or creative advice you have ever received, and how has it shaped your work?
Could you repeat that question?
What is the best piece of creative advice you have ever received, and how has it shaped your work?
Okay, best piece. I've received a lot of really good advice, really transformational stuff. But if I had to pick just one, I think it would be a piece that I heard delivered by Dan Brown of Da Vinci Code fame. And he says that he got it from Aerosmith. And it boils down to the phrase, give yourself permission to suck. I, like I'm sure a lot of other people, really want to be good at what I do. And that perfectionism can get in the way in a horrible way. And it really is allowing perfect to be the enemy of the good. But what that advice really talked about was understanding that the creative process, writing and apparently songwriting too, and I'm sure a lot of other creative endeavors, it's an iterative process. Nobody writes the book they're going to publish the first time they write it. Hemingway himself said that the first draft is crap. So giving myself permission to be terrible allows me to make progress, especially with the first draft. The first draft really is terrible. It's overwritten, it's got plot holes, it's all sorts of rough stuff. But if I'm trying to get it right, really, really nail it, as I'm going from blank page to draft, I'm trying to scale a vertical cliff. Whereas if I say, I'm just going to take this blank page and put some words on it, and then I'm going to come back around and I'm going to fix some of these words, and I'll do that 3 or 4 times, then that barrier of entry becomes so much lower. And I'm able to actually get the writing done because I just have to do one piece of it at a time. When I'm writing the rough draft, I just have to write some words. When I'm revising it, The first time I'll say, okay, I need to fill in the gaps and cut the fat. Then the third time I need to clean up the language. Each time it's okay if I'm terrible at something else because I'm not worried about that part of it. And that, since I have embraced that idea, I do not get writer's block ever. There are times when it's still rough going, but it's never, I don't know what to do, I can't do it. So I think that was the best piece of advice I've ever seen. Just allow yourself to be imperfect for a while.
Thank you very much, Russell. Thank you for that particular answer. So here is my final question for you. In your view, what actually makes a story useful or meaningful to the reader?
I'm sorry, one more time.
In your view, what actually makes a story useful or meaningful to a reader?
What academics or history would be useful, did you say?
What actually makes a story useful or meaningful to the reader?
What it's I think all stories that are worth anything are ultimately about human experience. It doesn't matter if it's space opera, historical fiction, autobiography. It's ultimately about people. There are certain things that all of us as people share. All right, there's wildly different opinions, cultures, upbringings, socioeconomic classes, but everybody, you know, still is human. And there are fundamental things about the human experience that we can all connect to. And I think that's ultimately what makes good stories really resonate with the audience, showing some kind of human experience in the midst of whatever trappings or settings that you happen to do it for you. So if you're like, my father was hardcore realist. Never catch him reading fiction, but he loved history. And I think the history that really resonated with him was stuff that actually spoke to some kind of experience that he could connect to. Me, I'm obviously way more into speculative fiction. I like science fiction and fantasy. And yeah, sure, I'll read, books about that include spaceships and dragons and all that, but if there's not a person having some kind of relatable experience in the middle of that, doubt, grief, love, these are things that can appear in any genre, in any story. And I think that without them there, nobody's going to connect to them. So I think ultimately that's what makes stories both appeal to readers. And I think it's what makes them useful to readers too, because it allows us to broaden our perspective on the human experience. And it's an exercise for our empathy, which I think could only benefit us as a people.
Thank you very much, Russell. Thank you for being my guest on this special episode. Today with Russell Anders, we explore the craft of storytelling from the long path to publication to the ideas, influences, and discipline that shapes the writer's voice. We talked about why stories matter, how audiences engage with them, and how genres like cyberpunk and science fiction continue to evolve. At the core of it all, writing is less about perfection and more about intention and practice. Thank you very much, Russell. Before you go, where can my audience connect with you and learn more about your work?
I'm on social media. You can find me on Facebook under Russell Anders. I'm on Instagram under Russell Anders Author, and I have a website, russellandersbooks.com. Uh, from that website, you can find my library, both as it exists now and as it grows. Also, if you like dogs, there's a whole section on there on my pups. And that's also probably the best way to connect with me if you're actually looking to drop a note.
Once again, thank you very much. Until next time, see you guys again on another episode of the show, Hidden Secrets in Books. Bye, guys. Thank you, Russell.
Thank you very much for having me.